Ladies and gentlemen, it is happening. Saudi Arabia and China have a plan that could completely end the petrodollar altogether. Because what have we been seeing lately? We've been seeing the world become more and more confrontational. China is fighting for global supremacy. They are nowhere near that yet, but they are getting closer and closer every single year. We're seeing more tensions like with Russia and the rest of the world. And we're seeing the US lose its global influence more and more every single year. But one of the main things that has kept the US and the US economy at the top besides the military industrial complex is the petrodollar. They removed the US dollar from the gold standard in 1971, but since then there's been huge demand for oil, and the US has benefited greatly with oil prices rising and all trade being done with US dollars to keep up demand for this fiat currency that in real terms has no value. But everyone, over the past month we've had some absolute massive developments with what's happening between the relationships with Saudi Arabia and China. We've also seen recently from the Saudi prince, he's not a big fan of Joe Biden. We all heard in November last year, Joe Biden asked them to delay their OPEC production cut till after the midterms because gas prices was such a big political issue. They've been draining their strategic petroleum reserves to keep gas prices lower. But again, they have had some huge announcements that is going to shake up global trade. And it could be, like I said, the beginning of the end for the US petrodollar. So everyone, this is going to be a very important episode. So let's not waste any time. Let's get straight into the news, the facts, and the data. Well, okay, the first piece of the puzzle to this story is this. China and Saudi Arabia agreed to boost oil trade as Xi visits Riyadh. So listen to this. Xi's visit to Saudi Arabia at a time of major turmoil in the oil market and geopolitics with Russia's invasion of Ukraine signals China's intention to increase its influence in the Middle East. Where the US was until recently the world's superpower with the biggest influence, the Chinese president's visit also suggests that Saudi Arabia considers its relationship with China one of the strategic importance. So could this be China seeing a bit of weakness in the US and they're trying to pounce and they're trying to rub shoulders Saudis right now? And if all of a sudden the US loses most of its strategic petroleum reserves and we enter into a global conflict, while the US doesn't have the oil to fuel their tanks, fuel their fighter jets, they are going to be in a very vulnerable position indeed. While the Chinese and the Saudis are strengthening their relations, the US-Saudi relations are at a low point, especially after the US administration slammed in October Saudi Arabia and the OPEC group for what it described as a short-sighted and misguided decision to reduce their target oil production by 2 million barrels per day as of November. So that's exactly right, everyone. Joe Biden was not happy with that at all. The midterms were coming up. He wanted oil prices to keep coming down, but they need to protect their interests as well. The oil prices were tanking, and that's the Saudis' main source of revenue, so they have to protect their interests as well. But like I said, that's just the first piece of the puzzle for this story. There's recently been a new announcement from Saudi Arabia, and this is absolutely game-changing. Look at this, everyone. Saudi Arabia says open to settling trade in other currencies. So you don't realize how big of an announcement this is. This is huge. And we've seen what's happened to other countries when they've tried to sell oil in anything besides the US dollar. Well, it hasn't worked out too good for them. But again, the US is losing its global supremacy and its global influence, and Saudi Arabia may see this as an opportunity to strike, and also China to benefit as well. Saudi Arabia is open to discussions about trade in currencies other than the US dollar, according to the kingdom's finance minister. There are no issues with discussing how we settle our trade arrangements, whether it's in the US dollar, whether it's in the euro, whether it's in the Saudi rial, he said at an interview in Davos, while the US may have an issue with that. The world's largest oil exporter, which has maintained a currency peg to the dollar for decades, is seeking to strengthen its relations with crucial trade partners, including China. The kingdom is a pillar for the petrodollar system established in the 1970s that relies on pricing crude exports in the US currency. During President Xi Jinping's visit to Riyadh last year, the two countries agreed to boost coordination on energy policy and exploration, and during that trip, Xi said that China would make efforts to buy more oil from the Middle East and also want to settle that trade in the yuan. So okay, this is another huge development, everyone. China is wanting to settle trade in the yuan. We know China's wanting to make the yuan more dominant in global trade, and this may be their first step. And what have we been seeing lately, everyone? We've been seeing the US dollar absolutely tanking. So do some market insiders know that the US dollar is going to have less demand? And if the US dollar does lose its world reserve currency status, we're going to see the US dollar absolutely plummet. We're going to see inflation surge again in the US because imports will be much, much more expensive. The Federal Reserve is going to have to lift interest rates even higher. And we're going to see, if you thought the crash was bad in 2022, we're going to see a much bigger crash. Because look at this. So this is the DXY, everyone, the US dollar index. We can see here the US dollar hit a peak around September 26th of the index hit 114, and we can see here it's been absolutely tanking over the past few months, and it's down around 10%. But that's not all, because look at this, everyone. This is a chart of global foreign exchange reserves, and we can see here in 1999, the US had over 70% of global foreign exchange reserves, but we can see here it's been falling lower and lower every single year. That, as well as the euro, and we can see here other currencies, the 10% of other currencies is rapidly rising. So we can see here the Saudis and China's relationship is getting stronger. The Saudis are now more open to trading other currencies, including the yuan. We're seeing the dollar tanking, and we're seeing less and less countries hold US dollars as foreign exchange reserves. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen overnight, next week, next month, even next year, but we are seeing the early signs that the petrodollar system is crumbling. Now, of course, the US isn't going to lose their world reserve currency status without a fight, so we may see things in the global scene, global conflicts, global tensions, trade wars get even worse over the next year, 2 years, and that's going to be bearish for the markets again, and could also be an issue with inflation, and it may be more weakness for the US dollar, which again could reignite inflation. The CPI numbers could go up again. So all the markets now rallying, hoping that the Federal Reserve will pivot. Well, like what happened in the 70s and the 80s, when the Federal Reserve pivoted, then inflation surge again. So this could just be another risk that we all have to pay attention to and monitor. But okay, what you're probably wanting to know is, well, how can you position yourself and protect yourself in case the US does lose its world reserve currency status? Well, what I'm doing and what many people are doing is they're buying gold and silver, because no matter what happens to the US dollar, gold and silver will always retain their value. Now, if you want an even more speculative play, I wouldn't allocate any more than 5% of my portfolio, but Bitcoin may be even a good play as well. Also a good way to transfer money around the world if you need to all of a sudden go to another country. It's going to be very hard to move tons and tons of gold or move a large amount of money in gold and silver. So also a way to diversify may be with Bitcoin as well. We've all seen what's happened over the past few months as the dollar's fallen, gold, silver, Bitcoin has been rising, and this will just increase astronomically if the US loses its world reserve currency status and we see hyperinflation. And what this could also lead to is another country like China or Saudi Arabia creating another gold standard or another currency backed by gold and silver. Once the US does lose its world reserve currency status, and once we see fiat fail yet again, people are going to want a currency that is backed by a real hard tangible asset. But everyone, what do you think about all of this? When do you think this will happen? Let me know down below. Now, for all my loyal viewers and subscribers who are watching, you're awesome. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next video.